Sitcovsky, a clinician here at Focus Center for Autism, usually a co-host of Life on the Spectrum with Donna Swanson, our executive director. Today I'm the host. Focus Center for Autism is a nonprofit that serves people with autism. We have a school, we have 2 residential programs, generally serve a population of kids between 10 to 22, but we're looking to expand to provide more services for adults. Usually in these episodes we've been interviewing clients or past clients or parents, but we felt it would be important for everyone to get to know our staff and just more about our approach. So today we have joining us is Maeghen. She works in the school, and could you kind of tell us what your role is?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Hi, I'm Maeghen Plourde, and I'm the Director of Educational Services at the Fresh Start School, so the approved private special education program as part of Focus Center for Autism.
How long has it been approved?
It has been approved for, I think this is the 5th year now, and we just went through our reapproval, which was a very exciting time for us.
So the Director of Education Services, that basically mean like you're the principal, or?
Yes, yep, so to all the students, I'm the principal. Yes.
And this is what you always dreamed of, right? When you went to school, you're like, I'm going to become a principal, I start as a teacher.
I had no clue this is where I was headed. So I started at Focus in 2010 as a social work intern. And before that, I really hadn't had any experience working with children or with children on the spectrum. So I gave it a try, and actually I fell in love with the work, and I never left.
What population did you plan on working with?
The elderly. I was planning on working at a nursing home.
And then you did an internship at Focus, and
Yep. And then I was like, okay, this is what I love to do. And my supervisor, Carol, you know, she really knew, she saw that in me in the interview, and she was like, we're gonna love this.
What do you think drew you to this population? Like, just like from like you never had any interaction with the population. What do you think? Why did that happen?
Yeah, so when I was working as an intern, I discovered it is a lot of fun. There's so much to learn from the students themselves. You know, every day is a different day, and every day can be a new day to try a new thing. And I just felt like it was a really great opportunity to be able to learn every day from the students. And, you know, seeing how much they overcome their challenges too. It's very inspiring. And it's taught me a lot about myself and how to work with students clinically.
How to reflect, how to not take things personally, right? Right. That's so important for all this. So yeah, so you were an intern, but then, but you're the principal. So how did that happen?
Yeah, so crazy story. So when the school was becoming a school, we did need a principal. So my predecessor, Carol, she was retiring, and they needed a principal. We actually hired or interviewed some people, and there wasn't anyone that was the right fit. And so they approached me to see if I'd be interested in returning to school and getting an educational leadership degree so that I could be qualified for this position. And I thought long and hard about it, and absolutely I said yes, and here I am.
So what are some things like you really learned about, like, just because I'm a social worker too, that are different, having to go to these education courses and learn about that side? What really stood out to you that really like might have changed your perspective or given you more insight about how best to work with these clients?
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting going into the courses with a social work background, you know, so I was looking at it a little differently than the teachers would. And I was happy to see also in my program there were a lot of related services, social workers, school psychologists, OTs, speech therapists who were going on to become educational leaders. And that to me was very exciting. It's a very unique perspective and background to have for this position. And I think that a lot of times in my classes too, the professors and the teachers would want to hear my perspective because it's a little different from where they were coming from.
It kind of sounds like Focus in general, right? Because we kind of come from a different perspective than a lot of people working, or a lot of places working with people with autism, right?
Yes, yep.
Because we kind of come from a more social work, even though not everyone's a social worker, right? We have special ed special ed teachers, we have APRNs, but it's kind of that person-centered approach.
Yes, person-centered, strengths-based for sure, and just looking at the milieu therapy, the environment, and how we can manage those behaviors.
Could you kind of explain milieu therapy?
Sure, yeah. Milieu therapy is using the environment to, shape behavior. So staff are all versed in this, and so, can take into consideration the lighting, the noise in the background, clutter even in the room.
So many
and how
sensory
that,
things.
all the sensory pieces that have an impact on the student and their learning.
People being too close, right?
Exactly. And it's really relationship based, so you have to be able to build that relationship first and foremost before any of the academics is really underway. So that's our first mission, is to be building that relationship and forming a strong bond, and building trust. Trust is a really important piece, and an important backbone to the milieu therapy that happens.
Yeah, because we're a clinically based school, right? The clinical part comes first, pretty much.
Yes, yep.
And we kind of say that because if you don't have a customer, are they going to learn anything? So, like, how do you see us being more clinically based? How does that affect how we are able to serve this population?
Yeah, I think that the clinical approach definitely helps because we understand and can be flexible. So when a clinical need presents itself, we can adjust the schedule, we can adjust what's going on for that student and really meet them where they're at, and then go from there. So academics will come, but this needs to be addressed now.
Would you say that some people might say, oh, that's like giving in to the kids, or,
Yep, we hear that sometimes, but it's really not, because every student needs something to be successful, and it's just about listening to what it is that they do need.
They will tell you, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And we've talked a lot about how it takes, you mentioned before, trust, how it takes a long time for people or kids who have had negative experiences in school. It might not be the school system's fault, it's just not have the, being in a class of 20 people and not getting the individualized supports creates this anxiety, and it's hard to manage. And they've had negative experiences. It takes a while for them to really believe. I think of one of our students like 6 years ago, or when he started 6 years ago, we said it took him a year, right, or something? Yeah,
usually a year to 2 years, just to start putting the guard down and being able to be open to the clinical work, and it takes a while.
And I think a lot of times there's frustration as people want the change to happen overnight, right, with their students. And our main goal is at the school, right, is to get the student back into a public school, because that's more real life, this is more build the confidence. But, they can learn these skills. They can, and if they're in the proper environment to help them and with the proper approach.
Yeah, and then as they're doing that, building confidence in themselves so that they can return to, which is always the goal, is the least restrictive environment for schools. Right?
Can you speak that out? What do you mean by least restrictive environment?
So least restrictive environment means the least restrictive setting, really, for an education to take place. So, ultimately you want to be in the public setting, in a regular ed classroom, and then it goes from there. So when you are outplaced, that's more restrictive, and the goal is to get back into the public setting.
So because of that, is it hard for parents to get kids into a program like this, or?
Yeah, it could be. So there would definitely need to be a definite reason and data to support why they would need to have a more restrictive environment to be able to access the curriculum.
I think that's important to mention for our program, right? We are social work, and people might think that's more qualitative, dealing with emotions, person. But we also do have to have data. What are education? What's it based on when the kids come here? Do we have goals or with the plans or?
Yep. So every student has an IEP, an individualized educational plan. And so that is created by the district and in the planning and placement team meeting. So together with the parent, with everyone for that student. And that's really what we follow. So those are all the goals and objectives and modifications, accommodations, anything that student needs to be successful in an education plan. So that is what we follow.
So we're really working closely with the districts. It's not like we're over here and the district's over here and we're fighting that
very much so.
We are in concert with the district and working towards similar goals.
Yes, yep. And, it's much better to have that really good relationship, not only with the district, but any other outside provider that may be servicing the student as well.
Do we have, is there outside providers here too? I mean,
Yep, so we
can
have
talk about
related.
that. I know that, but.
Yeah, we have related services, so speech and OT, for students that do receive services for them, they actually come into the school to service them. And we contract with Creative Development, who has been wonderful and really understand our team and get, fit well on our team.
And we even have kids who are a little older who are still receiving those services. They still need it, you know, to meet their needs. And like you had mentioned before, meeting the kids where they're at.
Yes, absolutely. So it's really on an individualized basis, whether they require those services or not.
So I want to go back to what you were saying earlier about being in these meetings, like when you were going to school. How did people look at you for like coming from a social work perspective? You said they were interested. Was it like, oh, you can't do that, this is like how, or they're kind of like, oh, that sounds interesting, or like that's a different approach?
Yeah, they're mostly receptive and interested in how a social worker would kind of, you know, approach the situation. And, you know, I think that there's more freedom to being a social worker and being able to work clinically with a student. That teachers would love to have that opportunity. They have the job to get done as well. And in the classroom, that can be limited sometimes.
Could you kind of explain how that happens in the classroom? So like, are the clinicians always in the class, or is it like the teachers mainly, like how does that work?
So in our school?
Yes.
Yes, so in our school, very much so, the clinicians are down in the classrooms. So it's not only the teacher running the class, there's also other adults and professionals in the classroom. So there's teacher assistants, the clinicians to kind of oversee anything and help out a student that may be having a hard time, or managing the environment without that student even realizing it's happening. So
I think like I'm asking these questions, I know too, but it's like explaining this to everyone. It's, you know, we also want to make sure that the teachers are supported, right?
Yes.
Because it can be, and this happens a lot in other school districts. So like, it's because that's just how it's set up. You know, it's not the teacher's fault or anything, or the district's fault. It's, but when you have like 10 kids in a special ed class, and you have maybe a few people help putting out fire, you know, some kids having, you know, behavior. It's hard to manage a class if you're like the only one there. So what do we try to do?
Yes, I think that's a really important part about our program, is because we are small, we have a multidisciplinary team, and so we can really help each other out in that sense, and it makes it much smoother. So in the classroom, that teacher is really getting supported with the clinician there too, or the TA, or whoever it may be. So that they can focus on the lesson and be able to do that, and maybe somebody isn't able to access that lesson that day. So very seamlessly, so it's not, you know, a big deal. The clinician could take a student, and then the teacher can continue on what they're trying to teach. Yeah,
if someone's having a tough day, if they need a break, then it's, instead of forcing it to happen, the clinician can take that student, or even a TA or one of our interns.
Yeah, and we all wear many hats, so, you know, we all can do different things in school.
I think that's so important to know, is that, like, I supervise personally a lot of the interns we have, either from like St. Joe's or UConn, social work interns. And sometimes they'll ask me about a client, and I'll be like, well, you should probably ask Erica, even though she's like the special ed teacher and we're talking social work. Erica wears many hats. It's our lead teacher. What's her exact title?
Yeah, so she's the supervisor of special education.
Supervisor of special education. So I would say, hey, you should talk to her. Because we all have different expertise and different clients. We all work differently with different clients. That's why it's so important to have that multidisciplinary team. Have different perspectives. Even though we kind of have a similar perspective, it's, you know, everyone has different approaches.
Which is why also that we hold true to our weekly meetings. So every week we come together as an academic/clinical team, and that's pretty much everybody, TAs included. And we discuss students, we case students, and try to, you know, problem solve.
And we have time really to talk about all the different students, because we're a smaller private special ed, or what's the correct term?
Approved private special education program.
So, and I was thinking about that recently too, because we would have meetings before, but sometimes it would happen during the day. What we've changed, and I think a lot of other special ed programs do, is taking a half day.
Yes.
And so on Thursdays we have half days, so we're able to meet. And this is only the past 3 years, right? So it's hard to think, we try to fit everything into like an hour meeting during the day when kids are there, but it's like, there's so much to talk about every day, even if it's not a crazy week. Every kid is so involved that we need that time to talk about.
And we could really put our full attention onto the casings.
Yeah.
That makes a big difference.
Yeah. How would a parent get a student into our school?
So if, from the parents, first step would be, speaking with their school district and, talking about that and advocating in the PPT.
And that's just, that is the start of the process.
Yes, exactly. Talking about any concerns that they have. Are the goals and objectives being met? And if not, how so?
Yeah.
And just having a conversation with the PPT team.
Because it really does, everything does go through the school district, right?
Yes.
So that's the only way really for.
Yes, yep.
Cool. What do you think about, like, what's so important about our environment or in the community that we try to build? What do you think is unique about it, or what do you think, since you're like the director of it, what is most important for you to try to foster?
Well, I think that, I'll say again, the relationship building that we have. So our environment and our culture is very much relationship based. And I think that makes a big difference because everyone feels safe. When you walk into the buildings, the students know who everyone is, right? Yeah. And even if we have a visitor, they feel comfortable because they trust us. Yeah. They know we're not going to bring anyone that is not safe. Yeah. And they're used to that kind of routine and expectation. So I feel like the feeling of safety, community, and trust goes a long way, and I think that that's a really strong element.
Was that talked about at all in your school, like how like safety or feeling comfortability in school, is that like something you learn about, or is it something?
Actually, yes.
Okay.
For the educational leadership program, safety is a huge one, and culture in general, school culture. So it is a big topic, and it's a tricky one, right? Especially with a big district. Yeah. But to have some norms that everyone understands and knows, I think that's something we do really well here.
Because I think of always the kids that we have in our school are a little bit different. Their problems might be more subtle. They might be like, "What's wrong with this kid? He's fine. He can do this work." And it's really then I imagine them in a large school. Right. Having to manage transitions for every period if they're in high school. Yes. Having to manage where their locker is, how to get there on time, navigating the social aspects of high school. It's just so overwhelming that even if they would be able to do the schoolwork in a perfect environment, that it's all these worries get to them, and it's hard to be in a place where they can learn.
Right. There's a lot going on, a lot of noises. There's bells going on.
I always think of one of our past students, and who was interviewed in a previous episode, Alex, who we talked about. I think was diagnosed as ADD or ODD, oppositional defiant disorder. And then when you meet him, he's like the nicest kid you'll ever meet. He's so agreeable. He really cares about others. So what happened for him was in the school districts that he felt misunderstood, and they're trying to get him to do things, which is understandable from a school system perspective, and he would shut down, not out of defiance, but more because it was too much for him.
Right, so this is a good example of why, when we're always saying that every behavior is a form of communication.
That's so important, yeah.
His behavior was communicating something, right? So if we really stop and listen and look as to why was he doing that? We got to the bottom of it. It wasn't easy. It took some time.
It took a year. It took probably for him. We mentioned it before. It took a year for him really to somewhat trust us, and even then, after he trusted us, to actually open up about stuff he was worried about, probably 3 years.
Not oppositional bone in his body.
No, not because
he was so overwhelmed by the sensory around him, the social expectations that he wasn't able to meet at the time. He would have to shut down, and that was his only way to get through that.
And I would say a lot of the students we have social awareness, but don't know how to manage that social skill. So it's kind of really, really difficult because they know what's expected, but they don't know how to do it. And it's like learning those social skills And I always think of it as, it's not that people with autism can't learn social skills. It's just, I think of it, but it doesn't come as natural when we're doing, because I actually, talking about wearing many hats, I help teach a course with social thinking at work. And how do you navigate the workplace? How do you think about how others might perceive you? And it's difficult. And we talk about how that's like the social skills, it's like a universal language that any culture you'll see it, just getting along socially, talking to people. And it's just not as natural for people with autism. Doesn't mean they can't learn it.
It just needs to be taught in a specific way and explicitly, right?
And I feel like I see that happening a lot in school districts too. Like everyone's kind of catching on to that, that this is really needed, that people, you know, it's really about understanding what the kid's going through.
Yes, absolutely.
What are things that you think are important from the school that we do?
Well, I can talk a little bit about the transition program.
Yes, please.
So our transition program is budding, and we're really excited about that as well. So we've built relationships with organizations, businesses in our community right here in Canton and beyond. We've went out to Thomaston, for example, and other towns. And so for our students in the transition program, they've met all their high school requirements, and now they're focusing on the next step. So independent living skills, career skills, vocational, even college prep, or getting ready for college and what that's all about, college support. And we really take an individualized approach with that as well, which I think is really important for these students specifically, especially. So we want to hear what are their hopes and dreams, what is their realistic view of the future, and also talking with the parents about that and what their views are, and then work from there, make a goal, and make some steps towards that.
What I've noticed, because I help out a lot in this transition program, is when we get work placements and we really help individualize and find maybe small businesses or something that's of their interest. Our students get so excited to go to these work placements. And I know even this week we didn't have Monday because of the holiday, that one of our students is like, oh, I don't get to go. I'm so upset that I want to go to my work placement this week. Getting them excited. But it's also when we're there, it's not just fun. It's, what do you need to do? And we're trying to what do you need to look like? What's the expectation? Because they might not pick up on that naturally.
Those are the skills, really, all the soft skills. So are you getting there on time? Are you asking questions to the appropriate person in the workplace when you have a question? Are you dressed appropriately for the work placement? So there's a lot of things to consider, and those are all the pieces that we're helping with them with, and to become aware of.
Becoming aware of, becoming a routine. This is what I do. This is what I do to get, and we kind of like to treat the school day, even when the days we're not at a job placement, as work. You shouldn't be putting your head down. How would that look like if your boss was saying to you? Just kind of building those skills.
Yes, and so other than the work placements, what other things do we do in our transition program?
So we do, like I mentioned before, social thinking at work is one of them. We actually this year have started doing more cooking, and it's been great. And it's not just cooking; it's the whole process. So on Monday we'll pick a recipe. So for this week, I think it's apple crisp, because we also like to do community events. That's another thing we can talk about too. So we did one apple picking, but then this week we picked apple crisp as the recipe. So on Tuesdays we look at the ingredients lists, make a shopping list, get them budgeting for it. What is our budget for this week? So it's not just cooking. And then on Wednesday they go to the grocery store. Get it. We've had some mishaps, it's, and then we learn.
Life.
We supposed to have pudding, and we got the heat and serve, and then, oh no, we have to go back. And there was another thing today, we were supposed to get unsalted butter, and then, but we noticed it before and someone picked up salted. So, so those type of skills, how do you read a shopping list? How do you prepare for that? And then when we get all the recipes, all the ingredients, putting them away, and then on Thursdays we cook. So it's kind of building that whole thing together. It's not just, we learn how to just cook something.
And then you're going to be saving all those recipes that you're cooking together in a cookbook for the year, right? For them to take home.
In the first one, one of our students said the exact thing we wanted to hear. We made a salad recipe for the first week, and it's like, I can't wait to tell my mom. We should make this at home. So it's kind of building that excitement about cooking. And we had talked about that too last week with our students, that you know, it's just generally a healthy thing to do, and it's an important skill to learn and to be excited about that they want to do it. It's not like, oh, I have to cook when I get home. It's kind of building that excitement.
Yes, and confidence around it.
Exactly.
And they're practical things. They're practical things they can actually utilize in their daily life, go home and do with their family.
Yep. I think another important thing we try to build into our program for transition is the community events.
Yep.
You know, we taking them out bowling, we went
Yes.
apple picking, like I said last week. Even taking them we took them to downtown Collinsville and downtown Simsbury, just seeing, because a lot of times they, you know, might not be going out as many places. So just getting you more used to being out in the community. What's around? What are some resources that you can access?
Be curious about it and ask about it.
You go to the library.
Have a conversation about it.
Yeah, exactly. Those skills, like, may not be exposed to it.
Right.
But
And leisure skills are really important and not necessarily come easily to people.
Yep.
Especially our students on the autism spectrum.
Yep.
You know, so they need to be exposed to all the different things, or maybe even try something new.
Yeah.
If they didn't know that they enjoyed doing.
Yeah. Pushing
That's an important part.
outside their comfort zone.
Yeah.
Other than that, we still have them involved in some classes that are kids who are still in the technically school program. So the transition kids are in the school program too, but who are still need credits. So both the school kids and transition kids have health classes twice a week.
Yes.
So that's so important, learning about that part. And also arts and music. We have a music class once a week with one of our teachers who happens to be a music teacher as well. And we have an art teacher who comes in once, and it's so, being able to express themselves is so important. We've learned this week one of our kids' artwork was in a magazine that goes out to everybody in the US.
Yep.
So it's like, and it's building that confidence, and it's so important.
That's really important. There's such a therapeutic element to having those parts in the schedule still.
Yep.
And also the leisure experiences as well. They're great creative outlets for
it all connects, you know.
Yeah.
We try to look at the kids as a whole person. What do they need, not just specific this need, you know, like everything.
And I think another really important part is, and this is school-wide, and including the transition program, is the mindfulness practices.
Yep.
So, you know, we do a formal mindfulness group
Yep.
during the week, but we also incorporate that throughout the
Try to
school
fit it.
day,
Yep.
right?
Both programs,
Yep.
both school kids and the transition kids.
Yep.
How to help yourself in the moment and not getting the kids so annoyed with me talking about so much about the amygdala.
Yeah.
Like, how does that trigger, or how can we help ourselves in those moments? Any last words, because we're running out on time, anything that you would like to share?
I think that I'm so grateful to have found the Fresh Start School and to have started back when I was a social work intern. And it's just been a wonderful experience.
Yeah.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about this today.
I appreciate having you on. I also appreciate Nutmeg for always having us and being able to, so we can share our perspective and what we do. And for clients, they're able to share. So on that note, I feel like that's it. So we'll see you next week.